Hello and welcome to Indus News. Live from Islamabad, I'm Naila Shajar and these are the headlines. Myanmar's military has declared martial law in some parts of the country after thousands rallied against the coup. Police used water cannon to disperse the anti-coup protesters who gathered in Yangon for the fourth consecutive day. Meanwhile, New Zealand says it has suspended all high-level contact with Myanmar and imposing a travel ban on its leaders. United Nations Special Rapporteur on Myanmar, Tom Andrews, has proposed sanctions on the country's military as well. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stopped short of endorsing the occupied Golan Heights as part of Israel. In an interview, Blinken said if the situation in Syria changed over time, the United States will look at it then. Former President Donald Trump officially granted recognition of Golan as Israeli territory in 2019. The United Nations says North Korea developed its nuclear and ballistic missile program throughout 2020. In a report, Security Council's North Korea Sanctions Committee said Pyongyang continued to seek material and technology for its programs from abroad in violation of international sanctions. It added that North Korea used money stolen in cyber hacks to fund the program. The World Health Organization has warned against dismissal of AstraZeneca vaccine a day after South Africa delayed its immunization drive. In Pakistan, over 1,000 people tested positive and 40 more died overnight, raising the death toll to 12,066. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.3 million lives and infected over 106 million people so far. And in football, Bayern Munich have defeated Al Ahly 2-0 to reach the Club World Cup final. Star striker Robert Lewandowski scored both goals for Bayern. The Champions League holders will face the Mexican side Tigres in the final. For more news and details, stay tuned. We'll be right back after a short break. Welcome back. Myanmar's military has declared martial law in some parts of the country after thousands of people rallied against the coup.
The military has imposed a curfew banning all gatherings of more than 5 people to stem growing widespread opposition to its February 1st coup. But protesters have vowed to continue non-violent actions against the coup. Police used water cannons to disperse the protesters who gathered in Yangon for the fourth consecutive day. Meanwhile, New Zealand says it is suspending all high-level contact with Myanmar and imposing a travel ban on its military leaders. New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern says Wellington will ensure its aid program to Myanmar is not delivered with or benefits the military government. United Nations Special Rapporteur on Myanmar, Tom Andrews, has also proposed sanctions on the country's military. The United Nations Human Rights Council will hold a special session on Friday to discuss the crisis.
U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken stopped short of endorsing the occupied Golan Heights as a part of Israel. Former President Donald Trump officially granted recognition of the Golan as Israeli territory in 2019. In an interview, Blinken said if the situation in Syria changed over time, the United States will look at it then. The Secretary of State noted that the territory was important for Israel's security, but didn't identify as Israel. However, he said the Syrian government and Iranian-backed militias posed a significant security threat to Israel. Blinken also reiterated the Biden administration's commitment to retain the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. Earlier, Biden's advisors said he would not withdraw U.S. recognition of Israel's sovereignty over the Golan. Saudi Arabia says it is committed to a Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital. Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan was speaking at an emergency meeting of the Arab League in Egypt's capital, Cairo. This report has more.
The meeting comes in the backdrop of talks between the rival Palestinian factions Hamas and Fatah in Cairo. During his opening address, Arab League Secretary General said the Palestinian issue is the focus of Arab consensus. Ahmed Abul Ghaid called for the resumption of talks between Palestinians and Israel. Also speaking at the event, the Egyptian foreign minister said Cairo is working to ensure peace persists between Hamas and Fatah. Sameh Shoukry warned Israel against any change in the status of Jerusalem. In their closing statement, the ministers welcomed a ruling by the International Criminal Court on its territorial jurisdiction in Palestine, which concluded that it extends to territories occupied by Israel since 1967. The meeting also discussed the conflict in Yemen, with the Saudi foreign minister slamming Houthi attacks on civilian targets.
The United Nations says North Korea developed its nuclear and ballistic missile program throughout 2020. This was disclosed in a report of the United Nations Security Council's North Korea Sanctions Committee. The report said Pyongyang continued to seek material and technology for its programs from abroad in violation of international sanctions. The committee said North Korea used the money stolen in cyber hacks to fund the program. It noted it was highly likely that a nuclear device could be mounted onto long, medium, and short-range ballistic missiles. However, it was uncertain whether the developed ballistic missiles were resistant to heat generated during re-entry into the atmosphere. Meanwhile, United States State Department said that the Biden administration planned a new approach to North Korea. In a tit-for-tat move, Germany, Poland, and Sweden expel Russian diplomats amid tensions over the arrest of opposition leader Alexei Navalny. The move was carefully coordinated between the foreign ministries of the three European Union countries. The three nations say their envoys were only performing their duties and were expelled unjustly. The Russian Foreign Ministry has called the move unjustified and unfriendly. It announced its expulsions last week while the European Union Foreign Policy Chief was meeting Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Later, upon his return to Brussels, Joseph Borrell said Moscow's move signifies that Europe and Russia are drifting apart. The World Health Organization has warned against the premature dismissal of Oxford vaccine after South Africa delayed its inoculation drive. Globally, the virus has claimed 2.3 million lives and infected more than 106 million people so far. More in this report.
As the world evaluates data about vaccination drives and processes new information about mutant variants, it is becoming increasingly clear that the immunization will take months more than previously estimated. South Africa has switched to Johnson & Johnson vaccine after data showed AstraZeneca's was not as effective against the local variant. However, it said it may roll out the Oxford jab step by step to assess its ability to prevent severe illness instead of completely ending it.
We've proposed an alternative approach, a new approach to the way in which to roll out the vaccine. And one proposal that's currently being considered is to roll it out initially just in a stepped manner, where the first step includes about 100,000 individuals that are vaccinated, in which we monitor the hospitalization rates.
Over in Europe, France's healthcare system has reached a breaking point with tens of thousands of patients mounting every day. In the United Kingdom, scientists have renewed calls for sweeping border curbs to protect the country's vaccination program against new variants. Meanwhile, recently released state statistics in Russia show it was the world's third worst hit country in 2020 with over 160,000 fatalities. In the United States, Republican Representative Ron Wright has passed away after contracting COVID-19, making him the first member of Congress to die from the disease. Meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden said the Trump administration provided inaccurate information to his team about the national crisis.
When we started to try to figure out what we were going to do when we came into office, because there wasn't much of a transition, we didn't have... We weren't given a lot of information. and some of the information we had turned out not to be accurate in terms of vaccine supplies.
Meanwhile, Canada is not taking any chances and has extended the stay-at-home orders for Toronto by another 2 weeks. To uncomplicate the vaccination process of illegal migrants, Colombia has given temporary protective legal status to Venezuelan refugees.
While Pakistan has recorded another 40 deaths from COVID-19 overnight, raising the death toll to 12,066. The health ministry says 1,008 new infections were detected since yesterday. The ministry says the infections tally has crossed 556,000, while over 512,000 people have recovered from the disease so far. The number of active COVID-19 cases in the country has topped 31,000. Meanwhile, Phase 3 trials have shown that the Chinese vaccine being administered in Pakistan has a very high degree of efficiency. Special Assistant to the Prime Minister on Health, Dr. Faisal Sultan, says it prevents 100% of patients against severe disease. Pakistan's Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa attended the ongoing war games of the Central Command at Karya Garrison. The Army's media wing said that he lauded the innovation of military planners to face the challenges of modern warfare. The Army chief also interacted with officers, lauding their operational readiness and commitment to defend the nation. General Bajwa praised them for their high morale and unbreakable spirit. Earlier, he was received by Commander Central Command Lieutenant General Shaheen Mazhar Mahmood. The Afghan Interior Ministry has sacked a regional police chief over the killing of at least 11 civilians during a protest. The January 29 shooting in the central Maidan Wardak province outraged the country's ethnic Hazara minority. The ministry said that the protesters were armed when they were killed. It said that the provincial police chief has also been referred to the Attorney General's office for further legal action. It also promised treatment for those injured at the health center dedicated for security forces. Earlier, members of the Hazara community accused the government of inaction over the latest shooting last month. Twitter has refused the Indian government's request to remove over 1,000 more accounts linked with the farmers' movement. In a statement, the social media giant said that it believes in an open and free exchange of information. Twitter added that the safety of employees is its top priority while also protecting the public conversation. Meanwhile, New Delhi police have arrested actor Deep Sidhu for alleged involvement in the hoisting of the flag at the Red Fort on the Republic Day. He had also been accused by farmer unions of trying to defame their agitation and termed him a traitor. Meanwhile, Farmers Union has also announced to widen protest against farm laws with grand meets in Uttar Pradesh on the 16th to 23rd of February. In the United States, Democratic prosecutors say former President Donald Trump committed the most grievous constitutional crime. On the eve of the Senate impeachment trial, they say Trump incited supporters to storm the United States Capitol. In their final filing, the 9 House impeachment managers also insisted the case should not be dismissed. Earlier, Trump's legal team slammed the case as an act of political theater. They suggested Trump was exercising his First Amendment rights when he disputed the election results. The lawyers accuse the White House Democrats of exploiting the chaos of last month's riots. A trial will begin today with a debate and vote on whether it is constitutional to prosecute the former president. The United States says that it will re-engage with the United Nations Human Rights Council as an observer. It said that in a statement, the United States Secretary of State Antony Blinken said that the flawed body has a disproportionate focus on Israel and needs reforms. He said that the United States needs to be at the table and use the full weight of its diplomatic leadership to address the Council's deficiencies. Blinken said that the Biden administration is committed to a foreign policy centered on democracy, human rights, and equality. And when it works well, the body can shine a spotlight on countries with the worst human rights records. Former President Donald Trump withdrew the United States from the Human Rights Council in 2018. The United States says it aims to strengthen economic and trade ties with Brazil, but will communicate concerns. At a White House briefing, Press Secretary Jen Psaki said Washington will closely monitor Brazil's actions on human rights and climate. Paskey said President Biden announced an additional $300,000 in funding to bolster Brazil's COVID-19 response. She said the United States was the largest investor in Brazil and will continue to bolster trade in relations in months ahead. Meanwhile, Brazil welcomed the remarks, saying it looked forward to expanding trade ties with the United States while addressing the concerns. Earlier, the Democrat-led House slammed former President Donald Trump for cozying up to Brazil despite its disregard for human rights. It's now time for a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. The United Nations has urged 57 states to repatriate nearly 10,000 of their citizens held in camps in northeast Syria. With no legal process, the women and children associated with ISIS fighters are living in dire conditions. In a joint statement, the United Nations rights experts say these states must repatriate their citizens as per international law. They added that if there is evidence, the states must prosecute adults for war crimes in domestic courts. The experts also pointed out that the conditions in the camps may reach the threshold of torture under international law. Run by the Syrian Kurdish authorities, thousands of foreign women and children are detained in Al-Hol and Roj camps. Sudan has declared a state of emergency in the state of North Kordofan following the violent protests. And the state's government said that the curfew has also been declared to protect the lives of citizens and their properties. He said the protests in the states have been accompanied by acts of violence. Students have been protesting in Al Obeid and in the northern Kordofan in demand of the provision of basic necessities. However, the protests turned violent when demonstrators started burning public and private properties. In Sudan, Prime Minister Abdullah Hamdok has announced the country's new cabinet. Darfur rebel leader Jibril Ibrahim has been appointed as the new finance minister. Among the other appointments were Mariam Sadiq al-Mahdi, who is named new foreign minister. Earlier, Sudan said 3 representatives of armed rebel groups will be handed posts in the interim government. It said that the new posts will be given as a part of a peace deal signed last year. Sudan is transitioning to democratic rule after an uprising forced the military to remove dictator Omar al-Bashir in 2019. Pakistan Army has resumed search and rescue operation to locate the missing climbers on K2 for the 4th straight day. Pakistan's Muhammad Ali Satbar, along with John Story from Iceland and JP Moore from Chile, went missing while descending the K2. Pakistan's military media wing says Army would not leave any stone unturned in the search operation. Earlier, speaking to the media after reaching Skardu from the base camp, Sajid Ali Satbara said a rescue operation is only possible to search for the bodies. He confirmed the climbers scaled to the peak on Friday and came across an accident while descending. The current weather conditions have made the search operation extremely difficult. In India, the death toll from a glacier avalanche in the northern Uttarakhand state has risen to 28. Rescuers are searching for more than 200 missing people after a part of a Himalayan glacier fell into the river and triggered a huge flood. The violent surge swept away a small hydroelectric project and damaged a bigger one further downstream. Rescue workers are focusing on a 2.5-kilometer long tunnel where they say 30 to 35 people could be trapped. A team of scientists was also flown over to the site to find out what set the avalanche off. Earlier, officials say 25 people have been rescued so far. Most major shares in Asia Pacific have risen following overnight gains on the Wall Street that saw major indexes rallying to record closing highs. Mainland Chinese shares are leading the gains, climbing over 1.5%. Japan's Nikkei 225 has added close to 0.5%, while Hong Kong's Hang Seng Index has also edged up. South Korea's Kospi too has risen fractionally, but Australia's ASX 200 has bucked the trend, sliding nearly 1%. Tesla says that it has invested around $1.5 billion in Bitcoin, promoting more than a 10% jump into the cryptocurrency. Following the announcement, Bitcoin was up by 12%, setting a new record high above $44,000. Tesla said it is expected to begin accepting payments for its cars and other products with the cryptocurrency in the near future. The company added that the decision was aimed at diversifying and maximizing its returns on cash. Earlier, Musk encouraged small-time investors to buy Bitcoin, saying it was on the verge of being accepted among investors. It's now time to take a look at the weather around the world. For the latest news updates, you can follow us on our social media at indus.news.